Otherworldly neighbor. Evgeny Kostin always considered his life to be quite ordinary. He lived in a cozy apartment in an old building on the outskirts of the city. His neighbor was a man named Vadim, with whom he had maintained good relations for many years. Their friendship began by chance. Vadim moved into the apartment across the street, and soon a conversation began between them that led to a strong friendship. Vadim was a pleasant and sociable person. He always had many stories about his life, was interested in various topics, and often treated Evgeny to homemade pastries or drinks. Their conversations were varied, from simple questions about life to discussions of deep philosophical topics. One day, Evgeny noticed that Vadim stopped showing up for group meetings and didn't answer his calls. At first, this seemed strange to him, but he assumed that his friend was probably busy or had gone on a business trip. However, when this went on for weeks, Evgeny began to worry. He tried to contact Vadim again and again, but all attempts were unsuccessful. In the end, he decided to go to Vadim's home to check if everything was okay. When he approached Vadim's apartment, he noticed that the door was slightly open. This seemed strange to him because Vadim was always careful and neat. Evgeny knocked, but no one answered. The front door was unlocked and Evgeny decided to go inside. The apartment looked as if Vadim had just suddenly left. Everything was in its place, but it felt as if everything was frozen in anticipation. The TV was off, the books were neatly stacked on the shelves, and there was a cup of cold coffee in the kitchen. Evgeny looked around the apartment. His attention was drawn to a strange detail. In the corner of the room lay old photographs and notes that seemed unusable. There was nothing obviously suspicious about them, but he felt a strange uneasiness. After this, Evgeny intensified his attempts to find Vadim even more. He contacted the building manager, neighbors, and even the police, but no one knew what had happened to his friend. Everyone was sure that Vadim had simply disappeared without a trace. As time went on, Evgeny's fear and anxiety only grew. He began to notice strange things in his own home. Sometimes he felt like someone was looking at him, and strange sounds came from the apartment next door. But when he checked, everything seemed normal. One evening, when Evgeny was sitting at home, he heard a strange whisper coming from Vadim's apartment. The whisper was unintelligible, but he felt that it was some kind of conversation. Evgeny's heart began to beat faster, and he decided to go into Vadim's apartment again. But this time, when he opened the door, he saw something that completely changed his perception of reality. There was no furniture or personal belongings in the apartment. Everything was empty, as if no one had ever lived there. Eugene noticed that the walls and floors were covered in strange symbols and drawings that seemed out of this world. In the corner of the room stood an old mirrored cabinet that had not been there before. In the reflection, he saw something that made him feel a chill run down his spine. In the mirror was a figure that was not part of his world. This figure looked blurry, but he felt that it was watching him. The next day, Evgeny decided to try to find out more about his neighbor. He began searching for information in archives and on the internet to find out who Vadim really was. He was amazed when he discovered that Vadim was completely unknown in the city's history and was not listed anywhere. His data and photographs turned out to be non-existent. Further searches led him to even stranger discoveries. It turned out that no Vadim Kostin had ever existed. All the documents he could find were fake. And the strangest thing, there was no mention of a person by that name in the records of previous residents of his apartment either. Evgeny was horrified. He began to think that his neighbor was part of some terrible plot, or perhaps even an illusion. He remembered all the strange things that had happened since Vadim's disappearance. He felt that none of this was a coincidence. One day, when he was returning home, he saw the strange figure coming out of Vadim's apartment again. It was unclear and distorted, but he felt that it was not just a human form. He followed this figure, which disappeared into the darkness. When he returned home, he found more strange signs and notes. One of the notes read, "He was there to watch. Now it's your turn." Evgeny was in a panic. Everything indicated that his neighbor was not just a person, but some kind of creature that came from another world. These creatures seemed to be able to change reality and influence people. Eventually, Evgeny decided that he could no longer stay in the house. He felt that if he stayed, his life would only get worse. He packed his things and decided to leave. But before he left the apartment, he left one last message on the wall. "I don't know who or what you are, but I'm leaving. My life is no longer my own." He never returned to that house again. New tenants moved into Vadim's apartment, and they never heard about the strange events that happened to Evgeny. But every time they passed by the empty apartment, they felt that something was wrong in that place. For Evgeny, his experience left a deep mark on his life. He never forgot his strange neighbor and the dark secrets that were associated with him. And although he left and started a new life in another city, he always remembered the lesson that this strange and sinister neighbor taught him. Sometimes what we consider ordinary can be far from what it seems.